John Kachula.
Hello, Daniel. How are you?
Hey, I am outstanding tonight, John. Welcome to the Edge Television broadcast.
Well, thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, man, I'll tell you what, I really like the topic we're going to be discussing tonight because while it seems like it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek topic or maybe a good read type of thing, I believe there is historical evidence that would lead one to believe that shape-shifting does occur or has occurred in the past. I know you wrote various books, and we'll talk about those tonight. And I think it also kind of goes into the sort of the mystic type of things of ghost and the paranormal as well. But John, before we get going, why don't you introduce yourself to the Edge Television broadcast, who you are, and why did you get started writing these types of books?
Sure. Well, again, my name is John Kachuba. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I am very much a student of the paranormal and metaphysical realm, I guess you'd say. I have 5 ghost books out that we'll talk about a little bit later, I'm sure, and also working now on a book about shapeshifters, which is actually due to the publisher next week. So I got to get cracking on that one. I grew up back east in New England, and part of the time I lived in the same town as Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I'm sure your audience probably recognizes them as, I like to call them America's godmother and godfather of ghost hunting. But they were the people that investigated the Amityville horror. The movie The Conjuring not too long ago was about some of Lorraine's experiences. And growing up there, I got a chance to know them and actually visited their house a few times and talked about some issues, some investigations that I had been doing in Connecticut. And I thought it was very interesting that they were so, first of all, generous and welcoming in every way. And they kind of really started me off on this. That was many years ago. It took a while to actually start writing about it, but here I am writing about it now.
All right. No, I do want to sort of center on shapeshifters because we have some upcoming shows that will be a great follow-up to that. But in history, John, there have been many sort of recorded stories of things or people that shapeshifted. Certainly, American Indians believed vastly, and most of the tribes believed in some type of shape-shifting into animal spirits, and I believe they put on masks and different things. Do you think that all that type of talk is lore, that those historical stories from the Indians, is it lore, or do you think there is a possibility that any of that actually occurred?
You know, it's an interesting question, and that's part of what I've been researching. I think, first of all, the first part of your answer is yes. I mean, there's a lot of lore and a lot of legends, not just from the Native Americans, but from people all around the world, and not necessarily, indigenous cultures. I mean, even cultures that are more, I hate to use the word, but let's say more sophisticated, more advanced. Even those cultures have stories and legends about shapeshifters. So when you get that many stories from all around the world, from the ancient Greeks, well, actually from prehistoric man way back up to today, you have to start wondering what the commonality is, and is there some truth? Is it based in some fact? Mm-hmm. And certainly some of my research has shown that there are incidents where people have experienced a shapeshifter encounter. Now, the nature of it is difficult to explain, just like ghosts. People say, what's a ghost? They say, well, it's difficult. If you've seen one, you can say what you've seen, but it's difficult to explain what that actually is. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, it's both. You mentioned Native Americans, and certainly there are a few different types of shapeshifters that are known among their culture. The Dene people, the Navajo, have the skinwalker, which probably a lot of your listeners may know what that is already. But basically a skinwalker is a shaman, a witch, as the Navajo would say, that has evil intents. He's not a good witch. He's a bad witch. And part of his ability is to be able to actually change physically into an animal form. So there's that. Up in the northern parts of the U.S., northern Midwest, and up into Canada, you have stories about the Wendigo, which is also a shapeshifter, and it's a cannibalistic shapeshifter. Mm-hmm. The Navajos also have something called the Chindi, which is a shapeshifter that is sort of a kind of a guardian of the environment, likes to wreak havoc on people that are wreaking havoc on the environment. So there's all these stories, and Daniel, as I've been doing this research, I mean, I've been uncovering, updated modern newspaper reports of shapeshifters in Africa, England, so all around the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, the idea that shape-shifting is not possible, I think that it really is. If you look at the thing called metamorphosis, do not basically butterflies shape-shift into other organisms?
Sure, exactly. And when I write about shapeshifters, I sort of write about them in a broad spectrum way like that. Because yes, things certainly do change. Butterflies are a great example. I mean, you have something that's a creepy, crawly caterpillar, ends up putting itself in a cocoon and coming out as this completely different creature, entirely different in every way. Mm-hmm. Nature certainly has shown us that happens. I think you could even make a case that human evolution is a form of shapeshifting. Mm-hmm. If you go with Darwinian theory, some critter crawled out of the primordial ooze millions and millions of years ago, came to land, and now you and I are talking. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of transformation over that period, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot of metamorphosis, if you will. So, yeah.
Yeah. And now, as far as skinwalkers go, have you interviewed any? Are there any of those present today?
Well, the Dene, the Navajo people will tell you, yes, that they're there. And there are stories that I've got in my book from some modern occurrences out in the Southwest. The only thing is, for good reason, they don't like to talk about skinwalkers. It's the idea that if we talk about it, we're going to be in trouble because it'll probably come after us. Mm. So they're very reluctant to discuss that. Mm-hmm. But there are written reports of that kind of a thing going on. Mm-hmm.
All right, we have this question from our live chat. This is from Chris Craig. Says, do you know anything about the portable reality involving Native American dances?
Portable reality?
Now, this is the first time I've ever heard that term, so I don't know.
Yeah, but talking about dancers, I'm wondering, I'm not sure what the portable reality is. That's a term I haven't heard. But I will say this. Going back to primitive times, if you look at some of the prehistoric caves in France and Spain and places like that, you'll notice that the cave paintings are always paintings of animals, mm-hmm. and it's on the hunt. And if you notice very carefully, the figures that are human-like frequently are wearing what appear to be either a mask of the animal that's being hunted or maybe like a cloak or a pelt or something. Now, obviously, these drawings are not very well detailed. But the idea here is that researchers now think that going into rituals, which would be dance, it could be meditation, it could be singing, it could be even just some kind of a trance in a way, that the hunters would not only sort of take on the appearance and form, in a sense, of the animals they hunt, but would actually come to believe that they are those animals, that they actually changed into them. Now, somebody looking at them would say, well, you haven't changed. But internally, they would feel they have. And I talk about this in my book, too. It's sort of internal shape-shifting. And I think that's what the caller might be referring to, because dance, especially among the traditional peoples, is a very important way of getting into a meditative mindset, Mm-hmm. And depending on what the dance is, it could very well be. There were deer dances, there were different kinds of animal dances, which are still performed today. Mm-hmm. And it could be that's what he means when he says portable reality, in the sense that the reality alters for them because they, in fact, do become the creatures that they are dressed as or that they're imitating. Maybe he'll give you a follow-up and see if we're on the right track there. The term is new to me, though. I've never heard that term.
Yeah. All right. And then here's from Peter from Australia. Asked this question. Some say that shapeshifters can only be killed with a silver bullet. What do you think about that, John?
Well, I would say it depends on what kind of shapeshifter you're talking about. We've got thousands of types of shapeshifters. The silver bullet, of course, is what they talked about. Was it, I guess, the werewolf, right? With the silver bullet would put a werewolf down. To me, that's one of these things that just becomes legendary. That, yeah, okay, a silver bullet. But in truth, there's so many different kinds of shapeshifters in different cultures around the world that, don't have anything to do with silver bullets. So I would say, if you're attacked by a werewolf and you got a silver bullet, you might be in luck.
Now in Europe, I've heard that, and I think I mentioned this in another show, but they have found graves and the cadavers or the skeletons have bricks that have been forced into the jaws, and they say the reason is because they believed that if they had their mouth open, somehow they wouldn't come out of the grave and turn into a vampire. Have you heard that? There's
a lot of actually, I was in Europe this year, over the summer. I was in 6 different countries, including Romania, doing vampire research there, as well as other shapeshifters. And there is a lot of stories about particularly vampire graves or supposed vampire graves. And there was all kinds of ways that they would try to keep the vampire from rising. I hadn't heard the bricks, but what I had heard was taking the corpse. For one thing, it sounds very simple, rolling it over on its stomach when you bury it, so that when it tries to claw its way to the surface, it's actually clawing deeper. I mean, it sounds weird, doesn't it? But
I like that one.
That was one method. He's going down further.
Yeah, sure.
But there's other grave remains that have found iron rods. These are ancient graves that have found iron rods driven through like the leg bones and arm bones, literally pinning the body into the coffin, into the earth. So, yeah, I'm not surprised about the brick. I hadn't heard that, but it's very common, especially in supposed vampire graves, to try to keep that body down there.
Okay. All right, we have this question come in. It says, some people with multiple personality disorder have been verified to change things like their blood type, diseases, injuries, and even their eye color, depending on which personality is present, all in the blink of an eye. Isn't that the trait of a shapeshifter?
Well, I hadn't heard that, but I would say, yeah, that's exactly the trait of a shapeshifter, is being able to make those kinds of changes. And that's multiple personality disorder. That's interesting. I've read a lot about that, and I hadn't heard of actual physical changes like that. But sure, I would say that would be indication of shapeshifting. Absolutely. And especially, it's interesting, that whole idea of multiple personality disorder, because in a sense, even if there's no physical change, this, again, is what I call an internal shapeshifter. I live in Ohio, as I said, and there was a famous personality disorder with a guy named Billy Milligan many, many years ago. And he was actually locked up in an asylum here in Ohio for many years. And there was a book, and I believe a movie came out called The Minds of Billy Milligan.
Really?
And this poor guy had, 12, 13 different personalities within him, all different types. And when that personality came out, whichever one it was, he was that person. He didn't make any physical changes, but you knew that he was no longer a 25-year-old guy. He was a 6-year-old boy, or he was a 75-year-old man, or whatever the different character was that would come through. So to me, that's what I sort of classify as an internal shapeshifter, where you don't see anything physical, but that mentally, psychologically, there's a change, there's a shift, and you become a different person. Think of people with schizophrenia. Literally they call it split personality, right? I mean, there's something going on there too. Now, it's a mental disease. I'm not saying that it's not, but the result is the same, that you have a different personality come out. You have a different person.
I think there is in the biblical text some event. I don't know if it was somebody Nebuchadnezzar or not. Somebody in the live chat can, or somebody watching the show can help me on that whenever. A curse was put on maybe a king or a prophet, and it said that he was banished. God banished him, and that he then began to grow hair and long fingernails and had to live like a wild animal. Somebody in the live chat, give me who that was, what that story. But anyway, to me, that was a first documented case. I mean, that's whatever, 3,000 years ago, a documented case of some sort of shape shifting there. So the stories have been around for a long time. Now, when you said you saw evidence in cave drawings, what did you see?
Well, I mean, the cave drawings, what they show is, mostly animals. They're mostly animal icons, but they seem to be primarily about the hunt. So you'll see a herd of different animals, but usually you'll see people involved there, the hunters. And if you look at some of these figures, like I say, they're not truly representational, obviously, because we're talking about a culture, thousands and thousands of years ago. But some of them have what looks like they're wearing masks, for instance, or maybe a pelt. So what you might see is a figure that has what looked like actually, I think one of the earlier ones showed what looked like a wolf mask. Again, it's not really detailed, so people can argue and say, well, that's not a mask, but a lot of researchers think that it may have been. Mm-hmm. So the premise would be that if you are a hunter wearing a wolf mask and you're hunting wolves, let's say, well, why are you wearing the mask? Mm-hmm. You're not going to fool the wolf, but maybe you become the wolf. And if you become the wolf, you're going to be more successful in your hunt because you understand how a wolf thinks, what a wolf does. You understand wolf behavior because you have now become the wolf. So it goes way back. And you have to remember that there was a lot of sort of shamanistic, they call it shamanistic hunter magic because they would, the shaman would put these paintings up there and they were done in a ritual way and explain to the people. They understood what was going on. They understood that by these paintings and by absorbing them and sort of getting into that mindset that they can go out on the hunt as that animal. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And also on that, the sort of the empowering, didn't some of the tribes in South America, wouldn't they rip out their hearts of their enemies and eat them to try to get their power? I mean, they were obviously anticipating some sort of shape-shifting there, some sort of empowerment, get the knowledge of their enemies and the skills of their enemies, some sort of transference of abilities that is not too far away from the transference of abilities of the animals that many tribes tried to get as well.
Right. That's a good point. And yes, certainly there have been societies around the world where, in battle, you take your opponent's heart or something along those lines, an organ or something, and you take it in yourself. And the idea is that, yes, you've now acquired your noble adversary's strength and cunning and whatever. And so, yeah, that is a way of shapeshifting, I would say. Mm-hmm. By the way, the biblical thing that you mentioned, you were right. It's Nebuchadnezzar, who was basically, they think it was a werewolf. They don't describe it, but you have him out eating grass, and they say growing fur mm-hmm. and getting sharp claw-like fingernails. As his penance. So yes, you're right. An old biblical reference.
Interesting. Well, again, I just don't think that when you have so many cultures that have, it's sort of like the pyramids. The pyramids have been found not just in Egypt, but they've been found in Mexico. They've been found underwater. Some people say there's some in Antarctica, in the North Pole, but they've been found on Mars, for that matter. We don't have to go there, but hey, that's for another show. But so those things are documented. Those things are there, and so is the history of different civilizations that shape shifting. They would shape shift into various things, try to get to the animal spirits. And I mean, if you look at Egypt, they always had those guardian gods that had cat heads, and the Greeks would have the centaurs. I mean, so there was this sort of hybrid between animal and human, and I think all that goes right into the shapeshift category.
Yeah, I agree, and especially you just mentioned Egypt. I talk about that in my book, and the gods that were half man and half animal, they call that therianthropic. When you're half and half like that. And there were a lot of them. Anubis, with the jackal head, and Bastet with the cat head. Mm-hmm. Who else? Horus with the falcon head. I mean, there's quite a few. There's several. Mm-hmm. And interesting thing about that is the Egyptians believed that was only one representation of their gods. So in other words, that was how they viewed them, but they could also appear in other forms too. So they were almost de facto shapeshifters. Mm-hmm. And I talk about that because it's a very early part of shape-shifting in religion, and that's another thread that I find very interesting. Mm-hmm. You mentioned before a biblical reference to what we would say is a possible shapeshifter. That's biblical, New Testament. You had the Egyptians with shape-shifting. You have ancient Greek and Roman religions full of shapeshifters. I mean,
Yeah.
Zeus and all the gods that were constantly changing their shape into many different forms. So there seems to be a trend throughout religion. In fact, there's a researcher, and I don't have the information right in front of me. I can't think of exactly where he is. He's somewhere in Europe. He's a European researcher, a theologian and scholar who studied some Coptic gospels, Gnostic gospels that are in, I want to say, the Morgan Library in New York. Somebody can check that. I'm pretty sure it's the Morgan. But he translated these things and he read them. And what the impression he gets out of there, it talks about, these scraps talk about Jesus before Pilate and what goes on there. And it talks about not so much the resurrection, but it talks about afterwards, the famous story that, Jesus and his disciples are walking down a road. Not Jesus, I'm sorry. His disciples are walking down a road, and all of a sudden they're joined by this stranger. This is after Jesus has died. They don't know who he is. They don't recognize him. He walks with them for miles and miles. And then at the end, they recognize that was Jesus. Well, they had spent a couple of years with him. How did they not recognize him? So in interpreting these Coptic Gospels, the scholar, I think his name is De Brock, has come to the conclusion that Jesus, in fact, could be considered a shapeshifter. He references other sources in that Coptic text where people just don't recognize him. People who should have recognized him, like the disciples and other people. He even says, if you remember the famous story where Judas is selling Jesus to the Sanhedrin, to the Jews, they say, well, how will we know him in the garden? How will we know who he is? And he says, well, I'll go up and I'll give him a kiss of peace, and that's the guy. The guy I kiss is the guy. Well, the question is even, why did he even have to identify him like that? Everybody knew who he was. There's a text from Origen, first century Christian scholar, who says, I'm paraphrasing it here because I don't have it right in front of me, but basically that Jesus appeared to people in different ways. And he talks about colors. He said sometimes he appeared white, sometimes he appeared flaxen, sometimes he appeared as an old man, sometimes as a young man. So what are all these things about? I mean, it's very interesting that these Gospels, these Gnostic Gospels, are talking about Jesus in the same way that all these other religions have been talking about shapeshifters. There's shapeshifters in Hinduism. They're all over. They're everywhere.
And I was just thinking while you were talking there, when somebody is possessed, many times their bodies contort. I have personally seen that. Some woman, I actually was watching an exorcism, and her face went way outside of its normal ability for muscles to move, and it was moving. So, I mean, that was some shape shifting there, John.
Yeah. No, I agree.
All right, we have this question from Kevin in Massachusetts. He says, John, is it possible that shapeshifters are really nothing more than demons acting as ETs, influencing people and the Illuminati, in turn deceiving them? So now we've got ETs, Illuminati, and demons all in the same question. Good one, Kevin.
I know. It sounds like a Dan Brown novel. I don't know where to go with this.
It's going to be one of them.
I have a different viewpoint on demons, in the sense that I'm not really a firm believer in demons. I've done a lot of work with my ghost stuff, over the last 10 or 12 years. And what I believe is that whatever happens after death, whatever plane of existence we go to, if you want to phrase it that way, I believe that if you were a good, decent, honest person in this life, that whatever's next is how you're going to be. On the other hand, if you were, a terrible, mean, vicious, violent, criminal type person in this life, that's how you're going to be afterwards too. So to me, that's the demons. But I don't put a lot of stock in the idea of a spiritual being that was never incarnate, but is, evil intent. So it's a different theology than a lot of people adhere to. So
okay, all right, and let's get to this question here. This is from Flatfoot. He just asked questions: where are shapeshifters described in the Bible? And I think we just described three or four of them. So Tony in Louisiana says, "Aren't the fallen angels the one who can shift?" Are you aware what a fallen angel is, John?
Sure. Yeah, I am. Well, I don't know. There are texts again from the Bible. There's an Old Testament text that talks about angels visiting human beings. But, like I say, unfortunately, my book is in manuscript form right now, so I can't easily flip the pages here. But I remember the text basically said something to the effect about always welcome the stranger because they may be angels in disguise. Now, that's my paraphrase. Mm-hmm. But if that's true, then that right there says that angels obviously can take the form of mortals mm-hmm. and perhaps other shapes as well. I mean, angels were never incarnate beings. So to be seen on earth, with the visitation and everything else that we read in the Bible, they appear as angels, but they appear in human form, not spirit. So there's a shape-shifting right there. Mm-hmm. So I would assume that any angel, fallen or otherwise, should be able to do that, I would think.
Okay, and for those of you who are just joining us either on our live TuneIn radio channel or our live streaming YouTube channel right now, we have on our newsmaker line tonight, John Kachuba. If you have a question for John, you can click in the Fast Blast link on the left side of the website, or you can join him in the live chat, both either on YouTube streamer or on our live chat on our website as well. You can put your questions in there, and Jade, our moderator, will get them over here to the broadcast. All right, let's go to this question here. John says, have you heard of a tribe of hunters who shape-shift regularly to catch their prey?
Huh. Well, other than what I've just said now in terms of, going through the internal kind of transformation, no, I can't say that I have. Although this is sounding vaguely familiar, there's a legend of a tribe of women that did that, and I'm trying to think where that was. I want to say it was in Australia, but I'm not sure. But to me, that smacked of just being sort of legendary lore. I mean, I couldn't find anything factual about that.
Okay, well, our one of our viewers in Peter from Australia, if you're still watching the program, you give us a heads up on that, man. All right, let's get to this question here from Curious out of our live chat off the website. It says, have you heard of Donald Marshall, who's on YouTube talking about shape-shifting, reptilian cloning celebrities and naming names?
This is a pretty widespread theory. I don't know who Donald Marshall is, but the guy that started this is David, and I know I'm going to mess up his last name. I say Ikes. It's Ickes.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, it is. Yes. Yeah. He's well known on the internet.
Yeah, right. And so he's the person that came up with this idea that, millions of years ago, alien reptiles came to Earth and basically, mated with the people here millions of years ago and created a race of shapeshifters, humans that can shift into reptilian form and vice versa. And his theory is that a lot of the world's leaders, including pretty much every American president, has alien reptilian shapeshifter bloodlines, mm-hmm. and so is capable of doing that. You mentioned Queen Elizabeth, some celebrities, athletes. I mean, it's not just world leaders; it's a lot of sort of influential people. It's a pretty prominent theory. He's got something like David says he has something like 12 million people in 47 countries that adhere to that, and get his newsletter and everything else. So I've certainly heard of it. Yes. The question I always have about that is, if there was a race of, I don't want to say people, a race of aliens or whatever, mm-hmm. that were so advanced technologically millions of years ago that they could actually reach Earth, why would they bother taking the slow road of doing shape-shifting stuff? Why didn't they just take over right away? I mean, it seems like a long, laborious process for no reason.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have this question from Joe Brand. It says, John, are people born shapeshifters? And if not, how do they become shapeshifters?
Yeah. Well, legendarily, people are either born as shapeshifters, shamans, magicians, wizards, sorcerers, those kinds of people supposedly have the power. Other people in legends are cursed. They are cursed by the gods or by wizards and become shapeshifters involuntarily. But are people born with that power? Well, I would say, again, if you look at this internal shapeshifting that I talk about, I would say yes. I just spoke to a guy not too long ago in Ohio here actually his name is Guy Savelli. You might know Guy. He was the sort of person behind that book and the movie, The Men Who Stare at Goats. Guy is a master of Kung Tao, which is a form of Kung Fu. And he will tell you that his strength and his abilities come not so much from the physical end as much as from the mental end, which is true of so many martial arts. But Guy is also a healer, and he also says he's a shapeshifter. When I asked him what he meant by that, he said that he has the ability to shift. And he said that it feels like venom. He feels like venom coursing through his body. Wow. And what happens is he gets this look. You've spoken before about an exorcist or a victim of an exorcism who goes through all those facial contortions. Mm-hmm. Apparently, this is what happens to Guy, is that his face takes on even sort of feline qualities like a leopard or a tiger. His students have witnessed this and have said that it's incredible that whoever is sort of in his face at the time or antagonizing him will immediately back off because it feels like a leopard has just been dropped in the room. So there's something that he's able to project, some physical look, some aspect that he's able to project by developing that internally and then projecting it outwards somewhere. So I think if he's got that ability, whether he was born with it or not, I guess nobody knows. But if that's true, then that ability does exist. That people can do that on an internal basis and maybe even learn to do it.
Mm-hmm. I can't resist this. Does Michelle Obama shapeshift into a man? You don't have to answer that.
I'm not going to answer that.
Okay. All right. We can get in trouble, but I don't mind getting in trouble myself. I have a lot of fun doing that. All right. Let's see what else we got here. John says, what was the ritual or portion that Viking berserkers used to acquire some of the attributes of the bear? Have you ever heard of the? Great.
Great. I was going to get to the berserkers. I'm glad somebody else got to before. So the berserkers were these Norse warriors, violently ferocious, aggressive, killing machines, no question about it. They would take on, there was two kinds. There were bear berserkers, or was also wolf berserkers. They went by a different name. I forgot what it is. It's a Scandinavian name. It's going to be in the book. But they would basically wear the pelts or even sometimes the headpiece of a bear or a wolf when they went into battle. And they were crazed people. That's where we get our term berserk, going crazy. Mm-hmm. Comes from the berserkers. It's not, it's not revolt. It's not revolve. That's the way it comes from. And the thing with these people is that they were so ferocious that allied warriors, if they were going in battle against somebody else, other people who were not berserkers but were on their side were told to give them a lot of distance, to stay away from them, because in battle they were in a complete frenzy. And they would basically just wipe out and kill anything before them. Enemy, friend, it was crazy. Interesting thing, though, is people now believe, there's a lot of researchers saying that they may have been under the influence of some hallucinogenic drugs, naturally found, whatever. I don't know exactly what it would have been, but something growing or whatever that had that same effect of some kind of a hallucinogen. Mm-hmm. And they said that's probably what gave the berserkers their power. Wow. And made them feel and think that they were bears and that they were wolves. Mm-hmm. When they were buried, when they died, they were buried in their wolf or bear, gear and everything else. They were actually outlawed, I guess, maybe in the 1100s or maybe even earlier, maybe the 1000s, by most of the Scandinavian kings because they were unruly, to say the least. You couldn't keep them in line. You couldn't keep in order. These guys were crazy. So, yeah. That's the berserkers for you.
Okay. All right. We have this question here. It says, do you know of, now I'm going to mispronounce this because I'm just a cowboy, so, I got limited education, therianthropes who experience mental shifts in which their minds and their thought processes will switch to that of an animal?
Well, let's see.
Therianthropes.
So if somebody is stereoanthropic, I talked about that a little bit earlier. That's basically half man, half animal. So what they're talking about, I guess, in the question is the shift that comes within them that would put them one way or the other, either, I guess, to an animal form or to their human form. I mean, that's basically what shapeshifters are. I'm not sure I'm understanding what the question is asking. That is what a shapeshifter is, the ability to shift. Now, the important thing is when you talk about a classical shapeshifter, you're talking about a human that can shift into an animal form but maintain its human consciousness. That's sort of the classical definition. But and so if you're doing that, even as a therianthrope, you're basically maintaining the human consciousness, even though in animal form.
So it does seem that there is some mental capability that people have to shapeshift, even if on a limited basis. Again, I think we've already covered historical evidence and various ways that shapeshifting does occur. And I'm wondering if somebody is trying to shapeshift to an animal, would the animal that they try to shapeshift into be able to communicate with them?
There's I have some stories from some African shamans who will say that yes, they communicate primarily with lions. These particular guys, they would shapeshift through dance, through ritual. The whole idea, they would say they become lions. And the interesting thing is, the people around them would say they see lions. Although it's again, it's sort of like Guy Savelli. People would say, I see a leopard in that man, I guess is the way to look at it, but not necessarily there. But they feel that they are communicating, that there's some communication with that animal form. I couldn't describe what kind of communication that is, but yes, they do feel that they are in touch with it. They're not just sort of in the body, but they're in the mind as well. They can communicate with it.
John, I had an interesting experience this week. I walked into a restroom and I was 3 to 4 feet away from a motion sensing towel dispenser and paper towel dispenser, and it spit out, and I had this unbelievable desire to try to make it do it again, because I thought, okay, well maybe it got a shadow, maybe something maybe it picked up from a distance, but I was zoning in on that, man. I was thinking, come out. I was thinking, trying to make that thing. And I thought for a second, man, that it was going to come out. I thought my mind was going to be able to wave, I was imagining waving my hand in front of it. And I really felt like it was going to happen. Never did. But I mean, that would be some sort of shape shifting if that did happen.
Well, I'm not sure about shape shifting, but it certainly points out what I firmly believe is the power of the mind. We don't know. We don't know how much our brains are capable of. We don't have a clue. We really don't. Guy Savelli, as I mentioned before, in some secret studies with the U.S. Army intelligence, it's reported that he dropped a goat. There was a goat in a room 100 feet away from him. And simply by staring at that goat in the distance and thinking about it and consciously trying to get that goat's heartbeat to slow down, he did. He got it slowed down enough where the goat was weak and everything else and passed out and fell on the floor. He knocked it out. That's kind of like your towel dispenser, but writ large,
Hey, I tell you what, I'm going to put a question out there for the viewers in both the YouTube chat going on and the live chat from our website. Has anybody ever looked at their animal and thought, say, go get your bone, or a cat to jump off the couch and quit scratching and ripping up the fabric? Has anybody ever done that without saying anything, but just like with a mind thing? If anybody's done that, put that in the live chat. And Jade, if you grab it, or if I don't see it, just grab it and put it in our secret Skype channel. All right, let's go to another question for you, John, as we get near the top of the hour, where we're going to take a 5-minute break. It says, do you have any information on Lady Diana claiming that the royals of England were shape-shifting reptiles?
Well, I think this goes back to what we were talking about before with that theory that, yes, there is a theory that the Queen of England, I think I mentioned her, I don't know about the rest of the family, but if the Queen of England is supposedly a alien reptilian shapeshifter, then I would imagine the rest of the family could be as well. The theory is that it's in bloodlines. So I would say, yeah, although Princess Diana was not related by blood, so maybe not her, but maybe Prince Charles and their sons, and I don't know.
Mm-hmm. A few years ago, I think Beyonce was doing the halftime show at the Super Bowl, which I will probably never see again. That's another story, or never watch again. But there are freeze frames of her, John. Have you seen those freeze frames where her thighs turn into like big, bulky looking, ape looking kind of something, man? I mean, and then there's other freeze frames of her face. And we talk about contorting. I mean, it looked like she was, and many people said she was shape-shifting right there. Did you see any of that?
I saw some of that. I I don't think that's shape-shifting. I think I think she's got probably pretty big legs. I probably shouldn't say that. But I think you can also do a lot with, photoshopping and weird angles and things like that. But
she kind of moved that theory along anyway, inadvertently. Although I understand that they try to delete that off the internet, which you can't do. But she had a website that I don't know if you knew this, or seen this, but it had a scroll bar at the bottom. And you move it to the left, she is Beyonce, and I think if you move it to the right, she becomes her demon god, Sasha Fierce. Did you see that?
No, I haven't seen that.
So they're right there. She's putting shapeshifting right on her website. I don't know if she still does that, probably not. But it was pretty strange stuff coming from that. But and talking about celebrities, and this also perpetuates the myths or the actual stories. There's George Bush, with his slanted reptile eyes, and they typically come out in freeze frames, and so they happen so quick. But if you have good software, you can stop the video and get him and see it.
Right, I've seen a lot of those, and in fact, some of them are actually slowed down, where you can actually, even without having a very good computer, you can see it happen. And it's interesting that everybody has this reptilian eye thing going with all these personalities and all. But, again, I have to say, if this were true, why would they be showing it off? I mean, wouldn't you think they wouldn't want people to know? I mean, I don't know.
That's a good point there. It could be perhaps their demon god commands them to do that so that they can remain empowered. I don't know. All right. Here we got another question for you. It says, fairies, witches, and wizards were all noted for their shape-shifting ability. Have you ever encountered any of these?
I can't say wizards or fairies. I do know several witches. Well,
okay.
well, I do.
Okay. It can happen.
Ghost thing. But I don't know that any of them are. I don't think any of them are shapeshifters. But yes, I mean, it's true that people, shamans, sorcerers, wizards, witches, fairies, all have reputations as shapeshifters. And I talk about that a lot in the book, because the interesting thing was that originally, thousands and thousands of years ago, the shapeshifters were the gods, as you mentioned, like the Greek gods, the Roman gods, who could change into anything they wanted to. Mm-hmm. And usually humans were at their mercy. Frequently, they were changed into something because a god was angry with them or was punishing them for something. But then sometime around the Middle Ages, things kind of change. And suddenly we have a whole sort of class of people, not gods, but people that have powers that are recognized by the rest of the common people as being supernatural. Mm-hmm. And that's the witches and the shamans and the wizards and all that. Mm-hmm. And they end up with this power of shape-shifting. Now, I think part of that has to do with technology and the fact that the old gods sort of die out when we realize that, lightning is lightning and it's not Zeus or it's not somebody throwing thunderbolts from the heavens. It's lightning, it's energy. So when you get to that point later on, in the Middle Ages and everything, where we start looking at technology more closely, we kind of dump the old gods, but we still want to have our foot in that. And so somebody has to have those supernatural abilities. So it becomes somebody sort of like you, but not like you. A witch, a sorcerer, somebody you recognize as being human and looking human, but with powers you don't have.
Okay. All right. We'll finish up this hour with this question here. Have you heard of William Sneeblen? He claims to know shapeshifters.
I have not heard that name. No.
Okay. All right. John Kachuba, we have your website in our background. Tell the folks about what they can find on there, about some of your books, whatever.
Well, on the website, all my books, all my ghost books and other books that I've written that are not anything to do with paranormal are available. You can read a description. You get them through Amazon or in your bookstore. I also have a blog that I would welcome people to take a look at. It's not the website. It's called Metaphysical Traveler, and it's right on my website, which is johnkachuba.com. Mm-hmm. So you can take a look at that blog. I think the most recent entry on there is my visit to Romania, visiting some of the sites associated with Dracula. So that could be interesting.
Okay.
And there's places to contact me if you want. My schedule of appearances is on there, too. So there's a lot of interesting stuff on there, I think.
Okay. All right, Dom, we're going to turn you down, keep you on the line for 5 minutes. We'll be right back with you.
Okay.
All right. All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge television broadcast. Tonight we have on our newsmaker line John Kachuba. We're talking about Shapeshifters and other entities. This program will begin to replay in our main player directly after the program. We'll upload it in our YouTube channel, put it in a podcast, and put it in our TuneIn radio playlist. We're going to be back in 5 minutes, and we'll be right back. Back to the Edge television broadcast. My name is Daniel Ott. If you missed it, it's an exciting broadcast that will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. Don't forget to come back next week. We're going to have back with us L.A. Marzulli talk about shapeshifters. We're going to talk about elongated skulls. And my friend, maybe we'll bring that up in the second hour with John on that question right there. 2 weeks, we're going to have with us Mark Taylor and Mary Colbert. 3 weeks, we'll have Stephen Lancaster back on the program as well. So we've got a lot of great guests coming up. Now let's go back to our newsmaker line and bring back with us John Kachuba. John, welcome back.
Thank you, Daniel.
Well, it's good to have you back. And I don't know if you heard that re-intro there, but a lot of stuff going on out there about finding elongated skulls, in particular South America, but I think worldwide. Have you heard of that? And would that not be considered some sort of shape-shifting?
I've heard a little bit about that. To be honest, I haven't followed it up too much. But again, we were talking about evolution itself being a form of shape-shifting, and depending on what these skulls are, it could represent a different form of evolution. And yeah, I'm not about sure about actual shape-shifting, but certainly a part of evolution, maybe.
Mm-hmm. In your research, have you seen any paranormal? Because I know from your website there it says you're sort of a paranormal investigator yourself by your own right. But have you seen any paranormal activity?
I have, yeah.
Describe some.
Well, probably one of the most interesting things I had happened to me was a place in Brooksville, Florida. It's called the May Springer House, and it's a Victorian-era house that is now the Historical County Society. Historical Society, mm-hmm. County Historical Society, that's the word. So it's this beautiful old house, and it's filled with all Victorian furniture. It used to be a doctor's home, and the people at the place asked me to do an investigation there because they had what they thought was a little girl ghost named Lily, and I think they're probably right. But we went there overnight, myself and an investigator from Tampa. We met with one of the people from the museum. Mm-hmm. We spent the entire night there doing research. And it was dark and everything else and quiet, and absolutely nothing happened. We were there all night long, and nothing happened, except that it was unearthly quiet. I mean, it was a very, very strange quiet. You could almost feel the quiet, but there was nothing going on. And prior to this, they had toys that were moved around. For instance, they would lock up the museum at night. They'd come back in the morning, and they would find these heavy old cast iron toys from the Victorian era scattered all around the house, and they had been kept in a display case. People had seen a male figure standing in the window after hours when the place was closed, and called the police on a couple occasions. And the police came and found nobody in the house. So there's a lot of things that were going on in there. So she was expecting a lot of activity, and we got nothing. So we decided, it was about 4 o'clock in the morning, we thought, well, okay, this is a bust. And that happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, we're just going to leave. So we packed up our gear, and we started heading out through the back door. And to get there, we had to go through the kitchen. So as we're going through the kitchen, which is filled with all this old Victorian era, cast iron stoves and all that kind of stuff, mm-hmm. there was a wood stove that was right next to us. There was only 3 of us who were walking very closely in single file with one flashlight to lead the way. And the wood stove on the top of it has a circular metal disc, probably maybe 1.5 feet in diameter, and it's cast iron.
Okay.
And it's attached to it. There's an eye bolt in the center of it. And attached there is this hook that's about 18 inches long, and that has some weight to it, maybe almost a pound. Again, it's cast iron. The idea was you would use that hook to lift up this hot lid to throw more wood into the stove, and then you would slam the lid back down. Okay. So the hook is laying across the stove, and as we walk by, in the flashlight glow, we see the hook. It raises up. It raises up like does a 180. It flips over, and it slams down on that hood. Bam! And it's so hard, and it happens so fast. It actually popped off the hook and landed on the floor. Now this was a big, like I said, about an 18-inch hook or so that probably weighed like close to a pound. And that thing, we all three saw it. There's no way that it could have done a 180 from laying perfectly flat, flip up and over, slam itself down, and then fall on the floor.
No.
So, yeah, we stood there and we looked at it and we just said, of course we had all our cameras put away, all our sound detectors, everything put away because we were leaving. We were like 5 feet away from the door. So the person who was the supervisor at the home said, well, I guess Lily, the little girl, just wanted to let you know she was here and she was just saying goodbye.
Only 2 words of advice on that one, John. Get the heck out of there as fast as you can. Well, a little bit more than 2 words, but still, run.
I'll tell you, that was dramatic. I mean, I've seen other things, there's of movement of little things, like you might be someplace and maybe something very small kind of moves an inch or two or something. Says, wow, look at that. Yeah, okay. That could be almost anything. But this was so dramatic. And it defied all the laws of physics, all the laws of gravity. I mean, it couldn't have happened, but it did.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are that sort of defined the laws of physics. I know we had a guest on the program that said that typically ghost activity or the sort of the aggressive ones, like maybe the poltergeists, typically are prepubescent little girls, and I wasn't really sure why that is, but that's what they said. But I do also remember we had another guest on the program said they were on a ghost hunt and they went into a house where somebody had dolls, like I don't know, were they hanging from the roof or the ceiling or something? And he said when he walked in there, all those dolls turned around and looked at him, and I'm thinking, okay, that's the time to vacate the premises right there, man. And another thing, and this now look, I'm a alpha male. Cowboy, John, but there's one thing that scares the crap out of me, and that is, and people know this that watch the show, it's a nutcracker. Okay, that thing's got some gnarly teeth, and they're wood, and they can do a lot of chomping. And I just feel like those things get up in the middle of the night and they walk around, man, looking for somebody to chew on, and it scares the crap out of the old cowboy, John.
Well, then you probably don't want to know that I came across a werewolf nutcracker. That would just
hell no!
Really
hell no!
Ante it up for you, huh?
Okay, well, tell me that story. What do you mean you come across a werewolf nutcracker?
Oh no, I mean I found this nutcracker in the shape of a werewolf. It's a werewolf, and you crack nuts in the werewolf's mouth. Yeah, what can I say?
Okay, well, I'm glad it's the only thing that thing is cracking in his mouth. All right, let's get over here to this question here. It's from Blintaz. It says, "Aren't the characteristics of shapeshifters supernatural? Isn't it impossible for the human brain to rewire itself instantaneously and such like that?"
Well, 2 different questions there. I mean, people would say that the idea of shapeshifters or the ability to shapeshift is supernatural. And I would tend to agree with that. I mean, I don't know how you could sort of instantly, as she says or he said, rewire your brain. However, I want to go back to what I talk about as sort of internal shapeshifters again, which is something that I think is more psychological than anything. And I think it's something that we might be able to control under certain circumstances. Some of us may have that ability, some of us may not. But I don't think that that's necessarily supernatural as much as just tapping into some features in our brain that allow us to do it. And I'm not talking, again, about having the external appearance of a wolf or a leopard or a bear, as much as having creating some persona, some aura that people look at you and say, whoa, I'm backing off. This guy's a wolf. This guy's a bear. And there's something about it. Like Guy Savelli, I go back to him and some of the martial arts stuff. I mean, I think there's something to that. And I don't know how to explain it because I don't know what it is. But I don't think that's supernatural as much as I think that that's something within us that possibly some of us can harness that, maybe not. but I think it might just be something innate that maybe we could use. It may even be something that we go back to. We think about millions of years ago. Think about cavemen. Cavemen could find a herd of animals without GPS, right? Okay. Without television alerts, without radio, without cars to chase them or trucks or vehicles of any kind. Yet they knew at what time of year the mastodons, were coming through their valley, and they knew where they were going to be. They knew how to get them. Well, how did they know that? How do they know all that? And my feeling is that they had an ability, almost telepathic in a way, to connect with their environment, with animals in their environment, and that was just a natural ability, nothing supernatural, a natural ability that we had as humans at one time. But as we decided and moved technology and everything else, we decided that, hey, we don't need those abilities anymore. And so we've lost them.
Well, that's almost sad, John. I mean, you mentioned as we were leaving the first hour that the old gods have sort of faded away, and our understanding of, say, lightning. Lightning is not coming from Zeus, but is it? I mean, a lot of people believe that the humans have the ability, one, to control weather, and two, I don't know that technology and understanding of today's knowledge. I don't know that we're any more knowledgeable of the world around us than they were thousands of years ago.
I agree, and I think your first statement about it being kind of sad, that I agree with that too. I think that we've lost some abilities, and I think that we continue to, the longer we have our noses in our cell phones, and I'm a victim too. I mean, I do the same thing. The more out of touch we are with the world around us. When I do ghost hunts, for instance, when I do them, I don't carry a lot of gear. Now, frequently I'll work with a lot of paranormal teams that have all kinds of gear, all kinds of electronic devices and everything else, and they'll wire the whole house. And I'll be there and I'll do that part. But what I like to do is I like to go off someplace in that location, someplace by myself, maybe a room alone or somewhere. And then I just sit down, and what I do is I meditate. I practice meditation every day. Okay. So I'll go into a place like that and I'll meditate. No tools, nothing electronic, just me and my brain. But what do I do in meditation? Well, in meditation, you drop all the barriers, all the social barriers, all the things that you are supposed to be able to say or do, or the things you're not supposed to be able to say and do, and you become just open. You're an open vessel. Okay. So I'm letting my mind just pick up whatever's there. And I think those abilities, some of us are losing, and some of us are regretting that. There was a playwright, an English playwright named Eden Phillpotts. Unfortunately for him, that was his name. But he said, "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." Mm-hmm. And I think he hit it right on the head.
My wife and I were driving down the road, and there was this horse on the side of the road. That horse turned its head and looked at us, and I had the strangest feeling that horse knew who we were. Did you ever get that feeling?
Well, I don't know. I mean, not with a horse particularly, but I do think that animals can sense a lot about us and can intuit a lot about us. I don't know if animals actually have intuition, but I suppose a naturalist can argue with that with me. Mm-hmm. But I do think that there is some communication. I do think that we have that. We have that ability, some of us, and I think a lot of us can learn to get it back too if we wanted to.
Well, there you go. And the other thing that we've discussed in this program before, and that is that children seem to, there's that case where they seem to see invisible people until adults talk them out of it, So there seems to be some sort of perception that they have, and that I'm just wondering. And you said earlier in the first hour, you said that that our brains have much more potential, and there's so much limit is so being limited by society. What society tells us is approved and what is not approved. And I think we lose that ability when we start to agree with them. And I'm just ornery about that, John. I'm not agreeing with society.
Good.
So, all right. Here's a question. Just not necessarily doing about shapeshifters, but maybe shapeshifters had a part in it. It says, did the Egyptians build the pyramids?
I think so. I'm not a fan of them being built by aliens and those kinds of theories. Mm-hmm. I think they're built by the Egyptians. That's about it.
Well,
What can I say?
I mean, a lot of people say that they've been built by harmonic devices or ancient gods or giants
Right.
or such like that. So there's a lot of theories. I mean, I have a little problem believing that the intricate placing of the blocks and the tonnage involved does seem like it would have some early history problems in that, but maybe they overcame that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was in Mexico a couple of years ago, and I was in some of the sites where some of these huge pyramids. I guess a little bit smaller than the Egyptian ones, but not much. And the way they place those stone blocks and everything is incredible. I mean, you can't get a knife blade between them, and there's no mortar or anything else. But I still think that, again, I think some of these lost civilizations had some science and mathematics and skills that we tend not to recognize or downplay because they're indigenous cultures, primitive cultures. We don't want to believe that they had that, but I think a lot of them did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Leroy Gonzalez says, have you ever come in contact with a real shapeshifter or someone who claimed to be a shapeshifter?
Well, let's see. Would we consider a psychic vampire to be a shapeshifter? I think I would. So I know. Well, yeah, actually, Guy Savelli too. So I'd say yes, 2 shapeshifters at least.
I don't think I got much use for a psychic vampire. Aren't those the boys that like suck the life out of you?
Yes. They prey on your psychological, on your emotions, on your state, on your mental state.
Okay.
But they're not. The one I know is not an evil person.
Okay.
She does it only with people that are willing to allow her to do it.
All right. Another question come in. It says, what do you think about creatures like the Mothman? Could that possibly be a shapeshifter?
I don't live too far from the Mothman. I don't know.
There.
I think there's a lot of cryptoids out there, cryptids, I should say, that we don't know about, and I think the Mothman might be something like that. I believe that a lot of these things, when you hear about Bigfoot and some of these other ones, Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, all these things, they don't seem so far-fetched to me, because I do think that it's very possible that there's been some type of animal species or whatever that has avoided detection, all these years and may still avoid it.
Well, the Chupacabra has been found, though. That is a real animal, and that was a sort of a myth, a mocked myth, before it started showing up in Texas.
Yeah.
So
right. Well, I also think of the fish, coelacanth that was pulled up off Africa probably back in the 50s or maybe 60s, where they thought this fish had been extinct for millions and millions of years. All they found were fossil records. And somebody's out fishing and they pull one up. It's like, well, okay, what are the odds of that? But suddenly, yes, it's still with us. It's alive.
All right. We have this question here. It says, are you aware of the Book of Thoth? It said that reptilian shapeshifters, I don't know what it says, but anyway, have you heard of that book? I guess it talks about reptilian shapeshifters.
I'm not sure. Is that Thoth?
Yes.
Okay, so that's the Egyptian god. No, I'm not familiar. I mean, just only parts of it, but I'm not aware of anything relative to shapeshifters in that. I'll look at that.
Okay. We were talking in the first hour as to whether or not there were fairies or wizards, but every culture seems to have them, and there are, I don't know if you've seen, back to YouTube, I saw this one video where some kind of creature is like, I guess it's in Mexico, and somebody's on a floor and they got a camera on them and like playing on the floor, and a little creature peeks around the kitchen, comes running out. Have you seen that video?
No, I haven't.
I mean, I don't know, I don't know if you can believe YouTube all the time, but man, there's some pretty convincing videos out there. I mean, there's videos out there of ghosts at schools at night, because there was vandalism at schools, and you're looking at this video, and all of a sudden stuff goes flying around in the hallway, and you're thinking, okay, well, this is a school, and it's not likely somebody had like wires, and went in there at night and planted the whole thing. I mean, so is it possible that ghosts really do exist out there?
Oh, I think so. I saw that particular video that you're talking about. It was a pretty good video. It's hard to say, obviously, with videos, with photos, anything else. I mean, today we can change so many things around with Photoshop and different kinds of, digital manipulation and everything else. I'm not saying that was a fake. It looked pretty good to me. But I happen to believe that there is that ghosts are out there anyway. So I do think that it's possible that they may have caught one.
You've got a couple books, and I've had I put those book covers out on our website a couple times here. One, Ghosts in Ohio, Ghosts in Illinois. But hey, man, we're here in Indiana, don't we? Don't we got some ghosts too?
Okay, so here's the deal with that.
Yeah, let's hear it, John.
So when I wrote Ghost Hunting Ohio, that was going to be the first of a series of books about Midwest ghosts.
Okay.
And I said, after I wrote that, the editor said to me, "Okay, so what do you want to do next?" I said, "Well, Indiana is right next to. I'm in Cincinnati. Right. I'm like 20 minutes away from the Indiana border.
Right.
I said, "How about Indiana?" And he said, "Well, we've already got 2 books in Indiana." So they had these 2 books by another writer. They're pretty old books, but there were 2 on Indiana already. So they said, "Well, we don't want to do the series with that." It's okay, fine. So that's the answer to that, Daniel. Sorry.
Uh-huh.
My editor overruled me, so I ended up doing Illinois and another book on Ohio.
Well, I can tell you 2 ghost haunted places. Well, there's a lot that I know of, but 2 famous ones in Indianapolis one is the Slippery Noodle, which is a bar, which is the oldest. They say the oldest bar. I don't know if Indiana or the Midwest. I don't know which one or the other. But anyway, they said that's haunted. And then down in Story, Indiana, there's it's a really way down in the hollers. You go around these turns, whatnot. You get this place that time had forgotten. And in the Story, Indiana, this building. There's only one building in the whole town, and you can eat there or you can stay there. But they said there's a lady that appears, the Lady of the Blue Mist is what they call it. So there's a couple investigations for you.
Okay, yeah, sure. The slippery noodle sounds interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you can't find a ghost, you can find a beer. So kind of works out.
Yeah, it does.
But and I've mentioned this in the program, and since you may not be aware of this, we had an awesome, I guess I don't know if that's a good word, but an incredible ghost account in Gary, Indiana, where this woman and her 2 children were there, and child services went there for some reason. And while they were there, they said that one of the kids walked up the wall backwards.
Wow.
And then one of the ghost hunting shows out there tried to buy that house. I don't know if they ever did, because they said it was that haunted. I mean, the police was there, and the captain said that his chair was going back and forth in his patrol car. His radio was being changed. I mean, it was an incredible event there, and it sounded like poltergeist activity and demons or ghosts or something. But there are so many things out there that just are sort of at our peripheral. Let me ask you something. Have you ever heard of shadow people?
Sure. Yes, definitely.
What's your take on that?
Okay, so I have some different thoughts on that. Some people think that they might be some kind of aliens or something. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling. I'll back up a little bit. I've been reading a lot of quantum physics. I can't say that I understand a whole lot of what I read. It's tough stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not that bright, But anyway, so I've been reading this, and one thing that quantum physicists talk about is the idea that what we call the universe is really a fallacy, because it's not the universe, it's the multiverse. And you probably had guests on your shows probably talked about this already.
Yes, we have. Josh Peck talks about multiverse.
There's basically an infinite number of realities, mm-hmm. all sort of in the same time, the same place, although time and place have no business in quantum physics either. But if you can get that idea of all these different realities, dimensions, if you want to call them, at the same time, I wonder if it's possible then that at some time, at some point, for whatever reasons, our reality, our dimension, literally sort of bumps up against another one. Mm-hmm. And that for a couple of split seconds, there's like an interchange. And in that interchange, we get a glimpse into that other reality. And we see something there. Maybe we see a being there. And we say, oh, a ghost. Or we say, oh, a shadow person. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, on that side, they're looking into our reality and saying, oh, a ghost. Oh, a shadow person. Mm-hmm. So I think it's more likely that there's some sort of cross between dimensions. Mm-hmm. So I guess, like a better word, something from another dimension, if you want to call it that. But I don't even consider that to be like a strange, unusual thing, because I do think there are all these other dimensions of reality. And at some point, we may be lucky enough to actually be able to access them at will.
Well, would that come up, say, in science, in technology, or would this be more acquiring our repressed abilities, say, like for telekinesis and for doing things with your mind?
Right. I would say it's probably a combination of both. I mean, it's physicists that are already advancing these theories. So hopefully, as their theories advance, they might be able to get further in that and find out, maybe you find out how we access that. But I also think, to your point, I think it would be beneficial if there's ways that we could increase our own abilities to do that.
Do you think that the use of drugs like peyote and various things like that is the way to do it?
I don't know. I'm not sure that they actually open up anything real, in the sense that they alter reality, but they don't really put you physically really in another dimension. They put you in another mental dimension, but I'm not sure that that's really the same thing. Although, philosophers say everybody's reality is their reality, right? And my reality is different from your reality. So I don't know.
Well, a couple shows. I think one maybe the Truman Show, and another one the Langoliers Stephen King movie. Both sort of indicate that instantaneously or in a microsecond, something is building your next second of time. Is it? Do you subscribe? Is that a possibility that could be happening?
What is the something?
What was that?
What is the something? You said something is building your next.
Yes,
second
right. Well, I mean, in the Langoliers, it was something that was eating time, and I think Truman Show, you had like a group of people building scenes in somebody's life. I don't know. It's something that would create, I guess, an entity or another universe, or I think maybe if you're talking about multiverses, how do you know that the next second is the same universe you were a second ago?
Right. Well, and it's not. I mean, see, I know.
Okay.
So, I mean, the Buddhists will tell you that the only thing that exists is now, right?
For how long, though?
There's no
how
there's
long
no past,
is now?
There's no future. There's only this moment in time, this one time. And isn't that true? I mean, we only exist at this moment. So I don't exist. I don't exist. Oh, wait a minute. I don't exist. Oh, wait a minute. I don't. We could do this forever. So we perceive stuff, and that's why physicists even say, like the quantum physicists say, there really is no such thing as time. So I mean, it gets really deep.
Yeah, I thought of another movie too. Are you talking there? I think there's a movie with Nicolas Cage in it. I think he's a magician, and he can see like 30 seconds into the future. I thought that was an intriguing thought. All right, we got another question coming in for you, John. It says, could Native American dance make areas of a house become haunted?
Native American dance,
yes,
make areas of a house be haunted. Huh.
Like if they were, I guess what the question is, could they, do a dance and then create a haunted house?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I would say that, hauntings occur sometimes in I guess, in historical context, in the sense that there were other people, other nations, other buildings, whatever, in that location before, let's say, your haunted house. So if you have a house that may have been the site of, a Native American village, or more often, let's say, a burial ground. I mean, there's been movies about this, right? About disturbing a Native American burial.
Yeah, was it The Exorcist? No, it was
the one.
All right, come on. We know this one.
Yeah, the television.
Come on, John.
Here.
Somebody get that movie.
Somebody help us out there.
Haunted is built on a burial ground. Was it the Amityville Horror?
No.
Okay, somebody tell us real quick in the live chat. What was the movie John and I are thinking about? we need to shapeshift our brains. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. They built a house on a Native American, and all kinds of stuff happened.
Right.
Was it called
right.
Poltergeist? Maybe,
Oh,
yeah, it was Poltergeist. That was the name of the movie?
Poltergeist. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the point being that I think there's some, some merit to the ideas of energy and sort of the, not just energy of the place, but energy of the people sort of being left behind in an area, and that that could affect your present life. I mean, Einstein talked about energy, right, with his theory of relativity. All the energy in the universe is constant. It cannot be created, it cannot be destroyed, but it can be transferred from one form into another. So what happens to all that energy? Since everything is energy, you and I, the machine we're looking at, everything is energy, then what happens, let's say, in that Native American village or burial ground? There's energy in that location. Well, now there's a house built on that site. So I would say maybe depending on what energy emanates from that, and what's going on in the house too, perhaps can cause that.
Okay, well, the human body generates enough energy to light a light bulb. I wonder if we took our energy and tapped into the internet, would we become the internet?
Whoa, I don't know.
Go ahead and try it. Let me know how it worked out for you, will you?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you're the researcher, so try that, John, and let me know if you can wire into the internet, man. Who knows what you would see? And I don't know what's coming down with this what is it, 5G network coming down when the whole world's going to be blanketed with and that whole thing about blanketing the whole world with the internet, that creeps me out, John. And to me, that's just going to eliminate any kind of stuff that's out there anyway, any kind of esoterical things, some hauntings, all this sort of spiritual things. Seem like it's going to try to blow it up or something.
Well, yeah, I kind of agree. And yet at the same time, it seems like technology is arriving at the point that some of the ancients have been talking about anyway. For instance, the idea of tapping into the internet, right? Everybody in the internet. I mean, Buddhists have talked about, I'll paraphrase, but the idea of a cosmic mind, that we're all tied in mentally to sort of this one consciousness. No, that's the internet. They were right thousands of years ago.
All right. Question from that Pat says, do you have any weird, insane asylum ghost stories?
Insane asylum ghost stories? Oh, yeah, I do.
Let's do it.
Let's
hear it, man.
Okay.
Let's go there.
So for several years, I was in Athens, Ohio, in the southeast part of the state, teaching at Ohio University. And there's a building there called, it's nicknamed the Ridges. It began in 1873 as the Athens Mental Asylum. And it's this big, beautiful, sort of neoclassical building sitting on a ridge over the river. It's gorgeous and it's enormous.
All right.
Anyway, it's not obviously an asylum anymore. It's the university owns it, but they can only use a very, very small portion of it because of safety issues. There's asbestos, lead paint, all that kind of stuff. So most of it is locked down. But there's been stories. There's been ghost stories coming from that place. There's a small section where some of the art instructors at the university have their personal studios, and those studios are actually former patients' rooms. So they literally just move the beds out, and the artists move their canvases in.
Okay.
But they've been talking about seeing people walking around in the halls, hearing voices, and just a lot of weird stuff going on. So they asked me to do an investigation there. And I did. I did an overnight investigation with a group that I brought down from Columbus, Ohio, to help me. And because I was an instructor there, professor there, I knew the facility's maintenance people, so I was able to get all these locked wards unlocked, even though they were abandoned. So we had free reign of this place from the attic all the way down to the basement. So we were walking around with recorders and with portable cameras and all that kind of stuff. But we also set up some stationary. So in the basement, we found out that the basement was where they had 3 or 4 different rooms that were literally what they used to call, the padded cells. These were places where they kept patients who were in danger of hurting themselves or others. And you have to remember how old this place was. Psychiatry wasn't where it is today, so unfortunately you would simply lock these people up in a padded cell and let them go crazy. So we put a recorder in one of those rooms, closed the door, and left it.
All right.
We did the investigation all night long. Early in the morning, we start packing up all our gear. We leave. Okay, so we leave the place. And now we're looking at all the video, listening to all the audio, and this is boring, boring, boring. It takes hours to do this, and it's meticulous work. We're listening to the audio from that basement recorder, okay. And all we're hearing is white noise, just shh, okay. Nothing else, just white noise. And all of a sudden, in the middle of that, we hear this voice say, "Would you help us?" Just like that. Just like that. Would you help us? And I'll tell you what, the hairs in the back of my neck stand up now, even as I'm telling you that. Very creepy stuff. So that was an EVP, right? Electronic voice phenomena. Okay. It turns out that it made sense. I've heard a lot of so-called EVPs, and all you hear is sort of noise and mumbling, and you go, well, I don't hear anything, or you hear something that doesn't make any sense at all. But this makes sense. If you were a patient locked up in that cell and there was somebody outside there walking by, what would you be saying to him? Get me out of here. Yeah. Help me, right?
Wow.
So it was awesome. There's a lot of things. I mean, that's one really.
Science can't explain that, can it, John?
They have not been able to explain it, and I can't explain it either. It's very weird. I was at a place in Cleveland with a woman named Psychic Sonia, who does tours of Cleveland, of haunted locations. And we were sitting in this bar, and she was telling me that the bar was haunted. Okay, fine. She said, I want you to hear something. I want you to hear a recording that I made with my girlfriend. She said, she and I were sitting here a couple of weeks ago, and we were just talking, and I had a recorder going. And she said, here's what you hear. So I'm listening to it. Right. And all I'm hearing is Sonia and her friend talking, just chatting away. And in the background, I can hear glasses clinking and people talking and laughing. It's a bar. So I hear all that, right? Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, in the middle of this, it's a blood-curdling scream. This woman just screams at the top of her lung like she's being killed. And the funny thing is, nobody reacts. All you hear is people still laughing. You hear Sonia and her friend talking and everything else. Nobody reacts to this woman screaming. All right. Why? Because it never occurred in real time. It was picked up on an EVP. It picked up on a recorder. Nobody heard it. It was never in real time. Mm-hmm. So those things really, you wonder about them. And Sonia actually thinks that there was a woman that was murdered in the basement of that bar back like in the 1920s. So that may very well be it. But yeah, you can't explain it. I mean, where did that scream come from?
No. I had a case like that when I was out in a graveyard about 2 a.m. Had an EVP going on, and like you, there was nothing there. There was no sound. Just recording it, and me and one of my sons were walking away. So we didn't get nothing there. So let's play it anyway because we could hear ourselves. We could hear our idle chat. We're gonna hear anything? No, and then we just real quiet. When we play that thing, and clear as day, somebody said turn around. And it wasn't there. We didn't hear it. But now, why is it that an electronic recorder can record that the voices?
Right. Well, and I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. I mean, I wish I did. Nobody's been able to explain it that I know of to any.
Well, see, that's why I have no use for science, because science really is trial and error. They'll tell you one thing one year and tell you another thing another. They never really get to anything, and it's just and I'm not a big Bang Theory person, but I remember in the beginning they said it was the original thing came from a basketball, something size of a basketball. Then science said it came from the size of a grapefruit. Then later they said it came from the size of a dot of a pixel of a TV. I'm thinking, okay, man, you guys weren't there. Quit telling me stuff like that. You don't know. You can't even make a model of the thing and make that happen. And that, to me, that sounds like witchcraft right there. Hey, we got a question come in. It says, do you know what dark energy is?
Dark energy. I've heard that term, but I don't think I know what that is exactly.
Let me see. I think our
I'm never hearing
our moderator, Jade, said, what'd she say? I'm looking in the live chat now. It says, dark energy is a theoretical repulsive force that counteracts gravity and causes the universe to expand at an accelerated rate.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
How you like that, man? We both just learned something there. But, when I'm thinking about dark energy, I'm thinking, it said in there, theoretical repulsive force. Dark energy always seems like it's doing something nasty, and maybe as we talk about multiverses, maybe one of those universes is a is a nasty place. There's a great show that we've seen on Netflix called Coherence, and it has to do with multiple universes, and people met each other in those universes, and a guy met himself, and his self that he met was the angry version of himself. That's the guy you don't want to meet. You do not want to be killed by yourself, John. So there are some universes you really want to stay out of.
I guess so.
But anyway, all right. So we got the idea that I think we've made a lot of progress in looking at shape shifting and the ability to shape shift. Presently, and like I said, presently we've got the shapeshifters of the elite, and I don't know why it always seems to be the elite, and why George Bush and Princess Diana or I mean not Diana, but the leaders in England type of thing, and various Beyonce and these kinds of people. But what about normal people? Do they don't get it, or is it just the empowering from a dark force that's giving them the ability, and the sort of lesser people do not operate in those realms of evil?
Yeah, well, I think when you talk about the celebrities like that, I think mostly what I've heard anyway when I've researched is that those are specifically related to the alien reptilian shapeshifters, that theory, which would mean that you're putting people in power, places of power. You'd want the shapeshifter there, but is it happening to common people? Yeah, I mean that's what I've been writing about, like tribal societies and everything else in Africa and things like that, where things are still happening today, where people are saying that they're seeing shapeshifters or having experiences with them, and these are just poor farmers and that kind of thing. So it's there's experiences, there's reports coming from all around still on that. It's not just the elite.
Now, see, John, I have a different reason, say, why I would be, say, creeping around a graveyard or get a house cleansing that I got involved with one time. My purpose is that, well, you could say, people would say, hey, Daniel, don't leave those things alone, and perhaps you don't bother them, they don't bother you. But I look at it as sort of a learning experience, because if these things are out there, then I want to be ahead of the curve. I want to find out how I can deal with them. And they may be affecting us and everybody, because there seems to be a huge amount of paranormal activity in our world, whether we see it or not, I think. And if it's affecting outcomes in our lives, I want to be able to be sort of empowered with knowledge or ability, however that works, to deal with these types of things, rather than saying, I don't want to look over there because I'm scared of them, or they might get me. I'm looking to gather information how to deal with these bastards. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. There's a lot of people that do, especially the ghost hunting kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that treat it as like something to do on a Friday night when you got nothing to do. Let's go out and have a good time and look for ghosts. Let's get a good scare, that kind of thing. That's never been my approach. I'm always interested in, I guess, what you're saying too. What is the nature of all these experiences? What is it about? What does it mean? What does it say for us? If these things are true, how do we live our lives? How is it going to affect us in the future? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm right with you on all that stuff. I mean, that's what I look about. It says so much about the nature of who we are, not so much what they are. So yeah, that's my approach as well. It's always been just trying to answer these larger questions. It's never been about trying to get a good scare or trying to get a TV show or whatever. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just hasn't been that.
Mm-hmm. There's a biblical test out there. I think it says something on the order that the things that are seen are made by the things that are not seen. And in another place, there's something about sharpening your senses so that you would know about those things. Well, if the things that are seen are made by the things that are not seen, that means there's an unseen world. And there in that unseen world can be some very negative things. And I think that we should work on strengthening our ability to be aware of them. And as I said earlier, to be able to deal with them. And like I say, why is one person sick and another not? How do you know that sickness wasn't, if we talk about dark matter, how do we know a dark force didn't bring that to you and is trying to destroy you? Because by nature, dark forces seem like they want to destroy humans or at least mess us up in some way. And everything may be just, you catch a cold and you got it, it's just a normal organic thing, but maybe it's not. Maybe somebody's, sickness is due to something tried to kill them. And in many cases, we talk about poltergeist activities. People have said that some things that they have been attacked by them. So running from them or pretending they don't exist or not messing with them. I'm thinking, hey, look, if there's a poltergeist, I'm going to bust him in the freaking face. I'm not going to say, when I hide and say, I don't believe in you. I don't believe in you. I'm going to say, yeah, I see you and I'm going to bust you in the freaking face.
There you go.
I'm a cowboy. I'm a little bit rough on the edges there, John. So you have to give me that.
All right, fine.
Man, I'm going to take these entities and these creatures on. I'm going to deal with them. That's what I'm going to do. But anyway, what you got coming up? You say you've got this book coming out. It's the Shapeshifters. It's almost out.
Right. Well, no, no, it's going to be a while yet.
Oh,
it's almost at the publisher.
Okay, it's at the. I don't know how that works. So it's at the publisher. Now he's looking at it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's probably going to be, with a little bit of luck, it'll be out maybe the end of next year, maybe around this time next year.
Okay.
But their contract, they have the right to even delay it longer if they want to, but hopefully not. Hopefully it'll be out the end of next year. So we got a year before that comes out.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I'm still promoting all my ghost books, and every year I'm on tour at libraries and universities and doing shows like yours, just talking about the paranormal. Mm-hmm. So I do that all year round, pretty much. So that's still there for me. Mm-hmm. So that's where we stand. I'm really interested in getting more about shapeshifters, getting to talk about that a little bit more. Part of what I did in Europe when I was there over the summer was I gave a talk at the University of Lisbon in Portugal on shapeshifters. And it was interesting because these are primarily grad students and a couple of undergrad students. There must have been maybe 50 or 60, but they're all young people. And they knew so much about shapeshifters, and they were so interested in it. And not just in an academic way, It turns out that in talking to them later on, I had lunch with some of these kids and everything else and talking to them, and it shows up in the movies they watch. It shows up in the books they're reading. It shows up in their own creative work. They are very much attuned to that idea of shapeshifters and are very interested in it. So I think a lot of people want to hear more about this. So I'm eager to start talking about it more and getting more on the circuit with that,
Well, and there is, to me, I think there's a vast untapped, and I don't want to say market, but I maybe interest in the paranormal. And I know that people can get off to go to Madame Boo Boo, and get their palms, in some kind of quirky thing, with a crystal ball, and go down to Mardi Gras and shake some beads or whatever. But I think in general, I think most people are spiritual beings, and I think the spirituality, the awareness of a larger world around us, apart from the seen world, there's a whole world out there. Who knows what's contained in that? But we keep coming up with things that indicate there's something out there, and I think a lot of people have been sort of corralled into the system, the sort of Western European system of you work and you pay your taxes and that's what life is. That just grates me, John. So I think there is, most people, once they can find out that there's maybe a way they can get some information to see what's out there, they might actually have better lives, at least more interesting lives.
I think that's probably true. And I think I agree with you. I think probably most people have some spiritual identity, however they define it, whether they define it by being a member of an organized religion or whether they just, feel they're spiritual and have spiritual feelings, for nature, the environment, whatever. I think it's out there. I think people feel that way. And I think it needs to be nurtured. That's all I can say. I think it needs to be nurtured. And, again, I go back to that English quote, about just patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper. Then the world will come into focus for us.
Mm-hmm. I don't know how that would affect one as far as being a world citizen, sort of like getting along with your neighbor type of thing. But it seems that the more spiritual somebody becomes, the less hurtful they become. I mean, I guess there are some that can find a way to become more evil that way. But I think in general, it might improve somebody's outlook, that, you know, there's a sort of a connectedness, and that, you know, an Indian, I like the Indian statement said, that life is a web, and what you do to the web, you do to yourself. But without that spiritual component, people don't know that the world is a web, that life is a web. And so they take advantage of other people, and they hurt other people. And there's that is sort of the human, you know, just being an organic being in a material world. If you don't include that third part, man, I mean, you just can't be all that we are designed to be. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
All right. Well, John, we're right at the end of our broadcast. I've got your website in our background. Anything you'd like to say about any of your books, your website, your blogs, anything, you go right ahead.
Yeah. My books are great.
Okay. Right on.
Everybody should read them. No, it's fine. I mean, my website is up there. Like I said, it had all the links to my books, but the blog, I think people find pretty interesting. Feel free to contact me. Any questions or comments or anything on the website, you can do that as well. And, you know, check out my schedule. And if I'm in your area, or you're in my area, whatever, let's get together. Come see me sometime. Right on.
We're close. And hey, man, if you need a write up in front of your new book, man, just give me a holler there, and I'll write something up for you.
Well, that'd be cool. That'd be great.
All right, John, appreciate you coming on the Edge television broadcast. Can we have you on again sometime?
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
You bet.
Take care.
All right, bye-bye. All right, everybody, that was John Kachuba talking about Shapeshifters. If you missed this program, it will begin to replay in our main player directly after the show. And we'll also put it up in our TuneIn Radio playlist and the podcast as well. Next week, talking about Shapeshifters. And, you know, L.A. Marzulli is going to be talking about the elongated skulls. But we're also going to be talking about the Fatima deception. Is that still going on? What was that? That's going to be an interesting show next week. So come back for L.A. Marzulli. He never fails to give us awesome information. 2 weeks, we're going to have with us Mark Taylor, Mary Colbert, talking about the Trump prophecies. And I've read the book, and it's freaky. It is actually freaky accurate, and we'll find out about that in a couple weeks. 3 weeks, Stephen Lancaster is going to be with us, and they're going to be talking about some ghosts and freaks and stuff like that. Hey, a lot of fun here on the Edge Television broadcast. Don't forget to tell a friend. Don't forget to also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And find me on Facebook as well, where I'm immediately after the show, when I cut out that ranting points, I'm going to put it right up there in my Facebook feed. That's where a lot of my, there's no sense of putting it up on YouTube because it'll just take it down, man. So the ranting points, YouTube doesn't like my ranting points. I don't know why. Maybe I need a shapeshift and bust them bastards right in the face. All right. That's it. If you have a guest suggestion, you can drop me a line, find a link on the website there where you can communicate with me. And, or if you have a topic that we haven't discussed in the Edge fashion, the only way that any topic needs to be discussed, it has to be discussed in the Edge way. Whatever the hell that is, the train wreck that could. All right, Daniel Ott for the Edge. Bye-bye.